Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. Prime Minister Modi came to power promising cooperative federalism and was widely praised for it. However, after dismissing two state governments in just 3 months, many say his use of Article 356 is reminiscent of Indira Gandhi. So tonight we ask, has Narendra Modi betrayed his own commitment, or is the comparison to Indira Gandhi unjustified? That's one of the key questions we should explore tonight. My guests are BJP MP Chandan Mitra, Congress's former Foreign Minister Salman Khurshid, BJD Lok Sabha MP Pinaki Mishra, CPM Central Secretariat member Nilotpal Basu, and the well-known Asian Age columnist Ashok Malik. Chandan Mitra, as I said, Mr. Modi came to power repeatedly promising cooperative federalism, and yet now, after controversially using Article 356 against two state governments in just 3 months, to many people, his behavior instead seems reminiscent of Indira Gandhi, who, according to yesterday's Hindustan Times, dismissed 50 state governments in the nearly 15 years she spent in power. How do you explain this perplexing U-turn in the Prime Minister's behavior?
There is no U-turn on the part of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister cannot be blamed if Congress governments in some states start imploding. It is not the BJP's fault. It is not the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi's fault. So, and the comparison with Indira Gandhi is completely odious. Indira Gandhi dismissed state governments at the drop of a hat without assigning any reason. Even perfectly stable governments were sacked. When she came back to power, government after government was sacked on just one fiat. So the comparison does not hold at all. And Mr. Modi has not kind of strayed from his concept of cooperative federalism. Look at the amount of involvement that he engages in with the states in terms of finances, in terms of other facilities. So the comparison and these assumptions are all wrong.
Pinaki Mishra, let me come to you as an independent who neither supports the Congress nor the BJP before I come to Salman Khurshid. And let's focus for a moment on Uttarakhand. Here, the government was dismissed on the grounds it had lost its majority, but in defiance of the Bomai judgment, which says that the majority of a government can only be tested on the floor of the assembly, and in willful disregard of the fact that the governor had anyway fixed a floor test for 24 hours later. Given those two facts, do you believe Mr. Modi was justified in using Article 356 against Harish Rawat's government, or was this an example of blatant misuse?
There is no question that this is an egregious example of blatant misuse. Chandan Mitra is right in saying that the Congress governments are imploding all over the country. But that's no reason to dismiss governments. Then governments, if they are imploding from within, must be allowed to fall on the floor of the House. That's the constitutional system that we operate in. So therefore, there is no way that this should have been allowed to happen. But Karan, if you give me just a minute, may I tell you, this is a very shocking and sad case where every constitutional functionary involved has strayed from the straight and narrow path. The Speaker, the Governor, the President, the Chief Minister, as well as a single judge of the High Court. If you allow me, I will expound on how each one of them has blotted the copybook.
I don't want to go into detail on Arunachal. Our subject tonight is to ask the question whether Narendra Modi has strayed from his commitment to competitive, cooperative federalism and is behaving like Indira Gandhi instead. Let me put to you another example.
My point is not just the Prime Minister who strayed, everybody has strayed.
Let me put to you another example that Mr. Modi's critics say proves that he strayed from his commitment to pure federalism. Oh, I've got Nilotpal Basu. I'll put it to him then. Nilotpal Basu, let me bring you in. I want to draw your attention to what happened in Arunachal Pradesh. Here, events were triggered by the governor's controversial decision to unilaterally bring forward the assembly session and order that it be presided over by the deputy, not by the speaker himself. And secondly, the crisis was precipitated by the governor's decision to recommend President's rule after assuring the Supreme Court that he would do no such thing. Now, critics have said both of this amounts to an abuse of Article 356. But the question is, who do you blame for that abuse? The governor in Arunachal or the central government in whose name the governor acts?
Mr. Karan Thapar, you are too seasoned to know what is the answer. We are very, very clear that it is decided right at the top, and they are thereby also exposing themselves, because you see, earlier all of us in the opposition used to criticize that governor's house is becoming a party office of the Congress, but here I think it is going far, far beyond, and absolutely small states and far-flying states where I mean integration is by itself a challenge, there to destabilize these governments and then also getting caught literally with their pants down.
Ashok Malik, you are by and large a supporter of the Modi government, but by no means an uncritical supporter. Now, Mr. Modi came to power promising good governance in addition to cooperative federalism. But what we have, as far as his critics are concerned, are two examples. Pinaki Mishra used the word egregious examples of constitutional high-handedness. So before I go to Salman Khurshid, let me ask you, do you think Mr. Modi has mishandled Arunachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand, or do you believe his actions there were justified?
While the performance of the Speaker of the House in Uttarakhand certainly left a lot to be desired and was extremely dubious, I would have been much happier if Mr. Harish Rawat's government had either proven his majority or lost his majority on the floor of the House. That would have been advisable rather than a dismissal of the government. In that I am completely in agreement with Pinaki Mishra. But I can't agree with you when you suggest that Mr. Modi has strayed away from cooperative federalism. If you look at the 14th Financial Commission report, if you look at the increase in royalties from the mining of resources from coal to iron ore to the states, if you look at environmental clearances for projects in governments run by in states run by governments which are not of the BJP or the NDA. In all of these, Mr. Modi's government has had a very good record. And if you speak to non-Congress, non-BJP state chief ministers, they would grudgingly tell you that his government has done a better job of managing sort of opposition-run states than the previous government did. And in that sense, I think his record is still fairly good.
Salman Khurshid, I deliberately left you to the last because the subject that we're debating at the moment is whether Mr. Modi remains committed to his promise of cooperative federalism, or whether he's strayed so far that he's become reminiscent of your former leader, Indira Gandhi, who, as I said in the introduction, had dismissed 50 governments in her 15 years. Now, the truth is, today you feel targeted, but actually, of the 126 times the centre has invoked Article 356, 88 of those, according to the Hindustan Times, happened under Congress governments. And one of the worst was in 2005, when a government that you joined shortly thereafter actually forced the president to sign the proclamation by fax when he was sitting in Moscow. So are you really in a position to wag the finger at Mr. Modi today?
I'm not sure that a serious conversation and a serious discussion about constitutional propriety and constitutional aspirations should be limited to what you did and what I did, and my doing was right and your doing was wrong. I don't think that we are putting any Congress government of the past on trial. That's history, and history must judge whatever our performance was and whatever our commitment to democracy was. Today we are in a year in time and space in which we need to decide whatever is happening is right or it's wrong. And let's go by the standards that they've applied themselves. Let's not go by our standards. Let's go by the standards that the BJP has applied, and tell us honestly whether this meets the BJP standards that are spoken to the country. My answer is no. I think that they have been hypocritical. There's a dismal failure here. We are talking about 24 hours. 24 hours from the time that the Chief Minister was asked to show his strength in the House, they would have known whether he had strength or he didn't have strength. So my answer is very simple. Let's judge them by what they are today, rather than put them in a historical context. Let historians do that separately.
Chandan Mitra, I'm not going to ask you to answer what Salman Khurshid has said. He, after all, is your opponent. I'm going to quote to you instead what your ally, the Shiv Sena's magazine, Samna, said this morning about your handling of Uttarakhand. I'm quoting from that magazine. It says you've strangulated democracy. It says if the government had lost majority, the decision should have been taken in the state assembly. It adds, a government in power by democratic means should be ousted by democratic means only. And finally, Samna says, and this must be the hardest blow for you to take, the BJP used 9 rebel Congress MLAs to bring instability to the Uttarakhand government. That's your ally, your oldest, closest ally.
Well, this just shows that, all those who are saying that India has become an intolerant country and the Prime Minister has created a culture of intolerance, they should know that even our allies can criticize us in the most strident possible language, and they remain our allies. No issues there. But let me point out that apart from the fact that the Congress governments are imploding in these states, there is an additional factor. That is why the President's rule had to be imposed in Uttarakhand, although a date had been set for a floor trial. When you have the really unseemly spectacle of a Chief Minister caught on secret camera offering bribes to legislators to come over to his side, I mean, how much lower can you sink? And should democracy, people talk about democracy, is this a way to manipulate democracy? It is manipulative democracy, and manipulative democracy cannot be allowed to function, and this kind of corrupt practices cannot be allowed to triumph when, in a floor test. The floor test has to be genuine. It cannot be influenced in this manner, that too in public. I mean, what kind of morals and ethics of democracy are we talking about then?
Before I come to Salman Khurshid, I'm going to come, in fact, first to Ashok Malik. Ashok Malik, you said that you would like the Uttarakhand government to have been given a chance to prove its majority or lack of majority on the floor of the House, particularly because there were only 24 hours to go for that event to happen. But you've now heard Chandan introduce a new element into the equation, the alleged video that is suggesting that Harish Rawat was indulging in horse trading and offering money. Mr. Rawat, I should add, denies it and says this is fraudulent and fake. But do you believe that video justifies not giving the government a chance to prove its majority on the floor? Or do you say that this sort of video, when it's contested, must first be established in terms of its authenticity in a court of law? It can't be used immediately to dismiss the government.
You see, I have no doubt that the Congress government in Uttarakhand has probably lost its majority, or certainly had lost its majority last week. It may regain it next week with some deals, but that's another matter. I have no doubt that Mr. Harish Rawat has behaved rather suspiciously in the past few days, if not the past few weeks. I have no doubt that the Speaker of the House in suspending 9 MLAs behaved in a manner that was not neutral. Having said that, I'm a little queasy about using a sting operation to take a judgment, to take a decision of this nature and to judge a political personality or a government. I would still say, despite the needle of suspicion pointing towards Mr. Harish Rawat, there should have been a test on the floor of the House. If the Speaker behaved in an immoral fashion on the floor of the House, the country should have been able to see it and take a decision after that. But I would still have gone with the floor test.
Let me come to you, Salman Khurshid. The second point made by Chandan Mitra was that how could Mr. Modi not have acted, particularly using Article 356 when Congress governments are imploding? And the fact of the matter is that the problem began internally when the Gandhis failed to stem dissidence but allowed it instead to become division and lead to a split, first in Arunachal Pradesh and then in Uttarakhand. And now you potentially face those same possible problems in Himachal, maybe even in Karnataka, and very possibly in Manipur. So would you accept that it was mishandling of the internal divisions in your party by the Gandhis that provided the opportunity for Mr. Modi to step in and believe he has a grounds for using Article 356? That was clearly not the case when Indira Gandhi was in 82, 84, for example, dismissing NTR, who had a total majority that no one could contest.
Karan, I'm not very well equipped to look at facts of 20 years ago and then analyze them closely today. So I would request you not to go back in time. Let's look at what's happening today. There is enough today to judge and to pronounce about. If we have inadequately addressed issues that have emerged in our party in different states, it doesn't mean that someone should rush in and start a slaughter. Where is the problem? I mean, everyone says that if a party is incapable of keeping its flock together, and the party on the floor of the House, the government will fall. And if the government falls, what is the next thing that happens? Is an election. That's how parliamentary democracy works. Now, to find an alibi, an excuse that your mismanagement or your inability to handle your own dissidents has allowed us to do what we have done, and therefore you can't blame us. This is not an issue of blame. This is an issue of accountability. This is an issue of somebody in government with a stated manifesto of being cooperative in terms of federal structures, suddenly deciding to do something which is completely different. And two wrongs will not make a right.
There's a very interesting point there, Pinaki Mishra, made by Salman Khurshid. And again, as someone who neither belongs to the Congress side or the BJP side, I want to ask you, would you accept that there is a clear distinction between, on the one hand, Congress mishandling its own internal problems and allowing them to fester, lead possibly even to a split in the party, and on the other hand, Mr. Modi stepping in and using this as an opportunity to allegedly wrongfully impose Article 356 and therefore misuse that article? Would you accept that there's a clear distinction between the two, and Mr. Modi's alleged lapse is much greater than Mrs. Gandhi's failure to tackle an internal problem?
Look, I have no doubt that the two have to be kept apart. There is no doubt that this Congress High Command is probably the most enfeebled High Command in the history of the Congress Party. Even after Indira Gandhi's defeat, I don't think the Congress High Command was so enfeebled as now. The Congress Party always runs on the basis of fear, and that fear stems from the fact that the High Command gets you votes. Now, if the High Command can't get you votes, obviously the regional satraps don't give a damn for the High Command anymore, and that's why the party is imploding all over the place. Hard facts of politics, the BJP will try and take some advantage of it, but that advantage has to be within constitutional norms. I believe that if the BJP wish to wean away a section of disaffected congressmen, I think that's hard politics again. If the numbers are constitutionally permissible, that is hard politics. But then all that has to be done within the framework of the Constitution. You cannot, and particularly, for the BJP to invoke 356 when they have been so bitterly critical of past Congress governments, particularly, I was saddened to see Arun Jaitley, who I think, has upheld these constitutional norms and values all his life. For him to, try and make bold to say on television that, look, this is one of the most classic cases of 356, where 356 was absolutely necessary. I thought, I was saddened by that, because I didn't expect Arun, who has all his life fought the, blatantly illegal imposition of 356 all his life. Today he has to defend this. I thought he did so very half-heartedly.
Jokal Basu, I know that as a member of the CPM Central Secretariat, you're as much of an opponent of Mr. Modi as any opposition leader could be. But that apart, I'm going to put this question to you in the hope that you'll give me an honest answer. Do you believe that Mr. Modi's dismissal of two state governments, and beyond that, the handling of state governments which Chandan referred to, I'm talking about the fact that he's given considerably greater tax resources to them by accepting the 14th Pay Commission, mining and other royalties have been given to them in a much bigger way. Overall, what therefore is Mr. Modi's image in your eyes in terms of his promise of cooperative federalism? The question I began with. Do you think the concerns Chandan raised outweigh the downside of dismissing two state governments?
You see, this whole claim about cooperative federalism is a sham. Mr. Malik was earlier waxing eloquent about the implementation of 14th Finance Commission. Anybody who has followed the couple of debates subsequently will see actually net transfer to the states have reduced. On the one hand, from divisible pool, it has gone up, but on other heads, it has come down. Number two is this cooperation is also quite selective. Now, for example, it amuses me to see Chandan Mitra invoking the sting video to pursue the case of Article 356, whereas the Narada stings is lying there. We don't know who complained to the central government and do a authenticity forensic on the Rawat video, but everybody is clamoring. It has been raised on the floor of the House that the government must have an inquiry because it is besmirching the entire image of the parliament and of the political process.
You're making a good telling point,
never
Mr. Basu.
that was done.
Let me stop you. You're making a good telling point. Let me put it to Chandan Mitra.
Non-BJP government is also, so there is a scheme.
Absolutely. Let me stop you, Mr. Basu, because you made a good point. Chandan Mitra, what actually is being said is that you have double standards when it comes to using so-called stings to dismiss governments. You used it as justification for dismissing Harish Rawat, even though in 24 hours, arguably Harish Rawat could have fallen himself because there was a floor test he'd agreed to face. But the Narada sting, which no one has ever disputed, perhaps not even in private members of the TMC themselves. And clearly, Dinesh Trivedi is on record saying that members who are stung from the TMC should keep a low profile, which suggests that he believes it's authentic. But that didn't become grounds for you to dismiss the Mamta government. So you're very selective in the way you use sting videos to dismiss governments. There's not a principle here. There's expediency that determines how you use it.
Well, I'm surprised that a seasoned politician like Mr. Nilotpal Basu is falling back on an argument which he knows holds no water. Now, there are no grounds or no political circumstance to dismiss the Mamata Banerjee government, which has an overwhelming majority in the West Bengal Assembly, so no political or constitutional crisis has arisen.
I am not asking for dismissal. I am saying...
When
I am saying an authenticity test.
The legislature.
Go on, finish, Sandan. Finish
No,
your answer.
authenticity test will happen. But you see, I'm sure it will happen. You people.
What I am saying,
you people
Mr.
should get it done.
Thapar, could I respond?
The point is, in Uttarakhand, the day before, 1 minute, Mr. Basu, 1 minute. In Uttarakhand, a day before a floor test, when a video appears, which is on the prima facie perfectly authentic and has been corroborated by other verbal evidence, then if you do not act immediately, you allow this unholy buying and selling of MPs to triumph and completely derail the basic principles of democracy.
All right.
Therefore, to defend democracy and to uphold its traditions, the union government had to step in and use Article 356, which is not a happy situation.
What do you say
and BJP has always
very quickly, Chandan, I want to stop you. What do you say to Ashok Malik, one of your great supporters of your government, who says that he feels queasy when an unauthenticated video, even if its evidence is suggestively damning, is used to topple a government 24 hours before that government faces a floor test? What do you say to Ashok Malik? He's on your side of the argument and he has serious qualms about using this video.
Look, Karan, I respect Ashok's views, but I must say that in this particular
Thapar, can I respond?
There had to be immediate and swift action to save the confidence vote from being manipulated.
Okay.
And look, once a confidence vote would have been taken on the basis of purchased MLAs, now for the next 6 months, an illegitimate government would have been in power because they technically they would have won the vote of confidence, and then for the next 6 months you could not do anything about it.
Very quickly, Mr. Basu,
there are times
you can respond, but I don't want to make this an argument about the Narada tape. This is about Mr. Modi and whether Mr. Modi has become an Indira Gandhi or whether he sticks committed to his promise of cooperative federalism. Very quickly, respond.
I am not doing that. Neither am I demanding the dismissal of the Mamata government. That was something you said. my point is very, very clear that authenticity should be checked, one, and horse trading, I think, is not a monopoly of Congress, but we do not know what was the basis of this 9 Congress legislators walking over to the BJP side. I mean, is it so innocent and great pull of the charisma of Narendra Modi and RSS ideology that they did so? And finally, it is not only hurting Arunachal, but you see, we are not sure whether proroguing the parliament session abruptly is also a fallout of this whole unseemly development.
There are many questions that could be raised about the situation in Arunachal as well as, more importantly, Uttarakhand. We're not going to go through all of them. The question that I wanted to raise in this first part was a question with which I introduced the show. Is Narendra Modi staying true to his promise and commitment of cooperative federalism, or is he beginning to behave increasingly like Indira Gandhi, a lady who was renowned for the fact that she dismissed 50 governments in just under 15 years in power? Welcome back. You're watching To The Point, and we come now to discuss the President's role in the declaration of President's rule, first in Arunachal Pradesh and then in Uttarakhand. Pinaki Mishra, let's start with Uttarakhand. It's arguable that what happened in that state might not have happened if the President had either exercised his power to delay signing the proclamation or asked the government to reconsider. On an earlier occasion, President Narayanan forced the Gujarat government to withdraw its recommendation of President's rule against the Kalyan Singh BJP government in UP, and according to the papers, he did much the same thing when the government wanted to dismiss Lalu Prasad Yadav's government in Bihar. So my question is simple. Should President Mukherjee have taken a leaf out of President Narayanan's book and either asked for reconsideration of President's rule in Uttarakhand, or at least sat on it and not signed it in just over 12 hours flat?
The answer is absolutely unequivocally yes. I have no doubt at all that that's what the Honorable President should have done. But of course, the President has gone by the Governor's report, Karan, as you know. It's the Governor who's executed a very sharp U-turn. After first giving the Harish Rawat, the government, a chance to prove their majority or fail in the floor of the House, the Governor then all of a sudden sends a convenient report saying that this is a case for dismissal. And I think the Honorable President has blotted his own copybook, because he's a very avid constitutional reader, follower and an expert in his own right. And he should have taken a leaf out of President Narayanan, out of President Kalam, both of whom have forced past governments to relook their policy as far as the states are concerned, where which are in opposition to them. So I clearly believe that if President Mukherjee had counseled enough sagacity to this government would not have acted in the manner it did.
Nilotpal Basu,
indeed, it was his bounden duty to have done so.
And you're saying that he failed to fulfill his bounden duty, aren't you, Pinaki Mishra? That's what you're suggesting.
Sadly, yes.
Nilotpal Basu, many people have similar concerns about the way the President announced and proclaimed President's rule in Arunachal Pradesh. There, people felt that he made an error by allowing the proclamation to happen on Republic Day, which is in fact the day when India celebrates its federalism. Many people thought it was inappropriate to combine Republic Day with the declaration of President's rule in a state. Mr. Mukherjee should have deliberately and consciously delayed it by at least a day or two more. Would you be critical of the fact that he chose Republic Day to sign that ordinance, that proclamation, forgive me?
I think we can have a hair-splitting discussion on the correctness or incorrectness of the Honorable President. But you see, politically, whatever is decided by the Council of Ministers.
No, forgive me, Mr. Basu. Presidents have a right to ask for reconsideration. Abdul Kalam, you just heard, did that. Narayanan did that twice. You know they have that power to ask for reconsideration, and when that power is exercised, it often forces governments who are acting questionably to reconsider. That was an option that Mr. Mukherjee had. He consciously, deliberately didn't exercise it. in the case of Uttarakhand, and in the case of Arunachal, he actually consciously agreed to sign a proclamation declaring President's rule on Republic Day itself. Again, he could have avoided that if he wanted to. Hence my question, this is not hair splitting.
No, I am very, very clear that if I had been in his place and had all these with me, I would have surely questioned. But one really never knows what has been the consideration gone into by the President while deciding in a particular way. Maybe in his memoirs someday he will write and we come to know.
If you had been in the President's shoes, you would have asked questions and you would have perhaps sent Uttarakhand back for reconsideration.
The decision, but essentially the decision is had by the central government, and this is symptomatic of the status of our republic, where Republic Day is chosen to remove elected state government.
Forgive me, the point I'm making is the President had the power and the capacity to choose not to sign it on Republic Day. The fact that he chose to sign it on Republic Day means that he had no problem doing so. Therefore, I'm asking a simple question. Was he wrong to sign on Republic Day when he could have withheld for 24 hours more?
I have made it very, very categorically that I think it was an error of judgment, but again, on such decisions, the principal onus lies on the central government, not the President.
Yes, but you did begin by saying it was an error of judgment. Salman Khurshid, I want to ask you, as a congressman who has been a colleague of the President for decades, secondly, whose two governments were dismissed, how you view the President's behavior. Do you believe that the way he's handled President's rule in Uttarakhand and Arunachal Pradesh is something that has dismayed you personally?
Well, to tell you the truth, the end result is obviously something that we can't be overjoyed with. But you must understand the President has a very, very difficult position. You may argue any amount, but there is very, very little scope for a President to act under the law as far as the Constitution is concerned. And for someone to say that, look, why couldn't he have delayed? How does delay help a decision that inevitably
in the case of Uttarakhand, why couldn't he have asked the government to reconsider? After all, that's what Narayanan did in the case of Kalyan Singh in UP. That's what you've heard Pinaki Mishra say Kalam did.
Quite right. You can ask governments to reconsider, but governments do not necessarily reconsider because the President is asking them. I think we must understand the President has a moral authority, and for a government that is not concerned about moral conduct and moral behavior, there isn't much the President can do.
And I think should the President have used his moral authority? In this instance, clearly he didn't. Should he have used it?
It's so difficult to talk about someone's. It's so difficult to talk about somebody's moral authority unless you actually know the specific facts that were before the President and the circumstances in which the President took that. I certainly think that we have enough to discuss and enough to debate about than to start wondering about why the President acted in a particular way.
Well, I'll simply point out this, that yesterday on a show that we did for this very program, your colleague and official party spokesman Manish Tiwari said that his personal opinion, not the party's opinion, his personal opinion was that the President should have definitely taken more time over Uttarakhand, and secondly, very possibly he should have asked the government to reconsider. He said that speaking in his personal capacity, but he said it on television nonetheless. Before I come to Chandan, I want to go first to Ashok Malik. Ashok Malik, as I said at the end of part one, it's not conventional in India to criticize the President or raise questions about his decisions and his behavior. Some might even consider it an impropriety to do so. I've chosen to do it deliberately because A, I believe it's part of democracy to question all institutions, and secondly, it's also part of free speech. But are we being unfair to President Mukherjee in raising the questions I have? And I ask you to give a completely honest answer, and if you think I've been unfair, personally and individually, happily say so.
Like you said, I'm a bit queasy about questioning the conduct of the President on television. Having said that, you see, we don't have all the facts before us. I'm taking a theoretical position when I'm arguing that a floor test would have been advisable. In fact, no one will disagree with me, not even Chandan or the BJP spokespersons. Nobody will disagree with me. Having said that, perhaps the president was convinced that Mr. Harish Rawat was up to no good and was buying and selling MLAs. Perhaps he was convinced that the speaker of the Uttarakhand Assembly would not be a neutral arbiter in the floor test and would actually play drugs and drakes and would play games. And in those circumstances, the president may have felt, as a senior statesman and a senior politician, that the government had to go.
Okay.
In theory, I wouldn't agree with that, but you know, he's more knowledgeable than I am. He has more information at his command, and he's a wiser person.
Chandan Mitra, I deliberately
in terms
left
of
you.
practical politics, that is.
Chandan Mitra, I deliberately left you to the last. We don't know what happened between the government and the president over the Uttarakhand issue, and I'm talking specifically about Uttarakhand. But what we do know is that Arun Jaitley met him late at night on Saturday, sometime after 9:30, maybe even sometime after 10. And the second thing we do know is just over 12 hours later, the president signed the proclamation for Uttarakhand. Did Mr. Jaitley, did the Prime Minister put pressure and force the president's signature?
Are you suggesting something, Karan?
I'm not, I'm asking. I'm asking, did Mr. Jaitley, did the government put pressure?
How can the Prime Minister do that? How can the question does not arise. I think the President must be complimented, and here you are criticizing him. He must be complimented for having defended democracy, for having prevented a travesty of democracy, for having prevented this kind of horse trading to succeed and become an example later on. And I think on the contrary, to acting under pressure or force, President has used both his conscience as well as his knowledge of the law and constitutional niceties and provisions to take the correct step. Because even another 12 hours delay, the deed would have been done.
Pinaki Mishra, you were the most outspoken in criticizing the president. You felt that unequivocally he should have asked the government to reconsider the Uttarakhand proclamation of president's rule. You said that the president had not lived up to the high standards of responsibility his office expects of him. In the light of what you've heard from the others, do you want to reconsider what you said? And secondly, a connected question. Have I been unfair in raising this issue of the president's behavior, or was it justified? Please answer both quickly.
Number one, Karan, you know, he's actually not lived up to the high standards he set for himself. That's what I meant. You know, he himself has been so outstanding in public life that I think he's blotted his own copybook, I said, by not counseling restraint to the government. And number two, no, I don't think that, you know, any of us have said anything that would be considered improper or, you know, gross impropriety. I think every decision, and that's what the Supreme Court has said as well, that every decision is justiciable. Every decision can also be debated, whether it's right or wrong. We are not imputing motives. We are not imputing
and therefore
any kind
we have
of,
a right to question the president's decision, so and there's no impropriety in doing so.
It's a democracy. No question at all.
All right, many thanks indeed. My thanks to all my guests for joining me, and if you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye, good night.
Obviously, we can, you know, focus on the positive things that we did there against Australia.
We've got a very different team to those games that we played. We went through quite a few players throughout those 3 games.